everybody, and welcome to the show. Okay, the peaceful protests are continuing across the country, and I mean, they're great, folks. They're great. Gavin Newsom loves them. The Democrats love them. It's in fact they're so good that they're planning on expanding them this weekend with this other group that we talked about yesterday. Uh, it- Folks, this is insanity. This is absolute insanity. We know that they're planning and trying to expand these riots and make unrest all over the country, and yet not one leader has been arrested. Not one person that's organizing this has been arrested, pulled into anything. No one. We're arresting some thugs. Trump's doing a great job putting people out there trying to shut down the riots. Not one person behind this or who's organizing this has been arrested. Now we know who's behind it. It's out there. Everybody knows what's going on, but our DOJ won't do anything. The DOJ that can't decide whether they have Epstein files, don't have Epstein files, lost Epstein files, have truckloads of Epstein files. The DOJ that can't seem to investigate the Soros Open Society Foundation or Arabella or any of these guys. The DOJ that can't investigate the Democrats' involvement in J6 also doesn't seem to be able to figure out who's behind the nationwide rioting and protests. I'm not saying that the DOJ is undermining Trump, but, maybe we should start asking questions. Do we really think that if we arrested the people who were in organizing this and stopped that it wouldn't have an impact? I don't know. I don't know, folks. I know that this whole thing is absurd to me on every level. We're letting it happen. And I think both parties are using it. I think this is a uniparty play. They're using these riots to push the AI surveillance state. They're using these riots to push the big, beautiful bill. They're using these riots to distract. Well, Congress does all sorts of terrible things. And it's almost like both parties are okay with it. So I'm to say I'm discouraged or annoyed with this is just beyond the pale. The administration is failing on this epically, and us sending the Marines to shut down the riots while allowing the organizers to continue to plan more of them is absurd. Fine, send the Marines. That's great. Arrest the people behind this. How about that? No, we can't do that. I wonder why. Yeah, by the way, did you guys know the SEIU is involved in this? Yeah, SEIU. I'm not saying it's a RICO thing or anything, but anyways, this whole thing is making me sick. We got with us today Michelle Peterson. Michelle is awesome. I've known her for a while. She has been a one-woman wrecking ball fighting against the grooming and the child predators and all the nonsense that's occurring across this country. I am very eager to talk about this. Obviously, that's one of my biggest issues, right? So, yeah, anything against kids is a big issue to me. I care about it immensely. And I don't know, folks. I just don't know. It's an interesting thing. So I'm going to be real eager to talk to her about what progress she's making, what she's getting done, and what she knows. And a lot of stuff I do know, but I'm really eager to have everybody hear about it. So I'm looking forward to talking to her. And honestly, I'll be lucky if we get through just that stuff in this show. It's so much stuff to cover. But before we get to any of that, please, if you could, go to givesendgo.com/Renslaw. Givesendgo.com/Renslaw. Need your help, need your support, need your backing. We need you guys. We need you guys to have our backs to support us. $20 a month or whatever you can give. We're grateful for anything you can do, but we need your support. Working on lots of big projects, and we can only do these things with your help. So givesendgo.com/Renslaw. Also support us at TomRenz.com, www.tomrenz.com. You have to type it. You can't just put Tom Renz in Google. You won't find anything but hit pieces. You have to type TomRenz.com. Go to shop, check out our partners and affiliates. Scroll down. Of course, we got Block Trust IRA, but I want to scroll down today. Scroll down, down, and you will get to, there it is, RNC Store. B17, enzymes, all sorts of great things. Wonderful supplements. Lots of benefits. If you're dealing with cancer, anything related to cancer, it's a great supplement to help your body and to help deal with that nonsense. It's been out forever. Wonderful product. Love the stuff. Use it in my house. I want to urge you, take a good look at the RNC Store and support them if you can. All right, without further ado, let's talk about child predators. Let's talk about these monsters. Let's see what they're doing. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of people who've done more or who know more then Michelle Peterson. How you doing today, Michelle?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Michelle, your quest, your mission in this started from the personal story. Can you tell everybody a bit about that?
Yes, so this all started with me back in 2010 when my son was 15 at the time and he was being groomed by a male teacher who was 34. And I didn't know anything about it until October of that year when I overheard a conversation that was had between the two. I had come home late at night, went to go tell my son goodnight, and he was sleeping already about 10:30. So I went about my business getting ready for the next day. And about a half hour later, I heard him really annoyed and really ticked off the person he was talking to. And he said, I don't know how often you want me to call you. You know that I'm busy. He said, I'm taking a class and just working. And then he said, I'll meet you in your classroom tomorrow to pick up those paintballs. And my heart just sunk. And he was really not happy. He was very angry. And I knocked on the door and I said, who are you talking to? And he told me it was his coach from high school. And I said, you need to hang up the phone. It's completely inappropriate that he's calling you at this time. So he hung up the phone and I went straight downstairs and looked up the phone number that he was talking to and found thousands of messages between the two of them going back to May. So printed off a few weeks worth of that and just the phone numbers back and forth. There's no verbiage. It's just the cell phone bill. Took it to the principal the next day and I said, I think we have a problem. And he sat back in his chair, really kind of exasperated, and said, I just gave this guy a teaching award 2 weeks ago. So I think he knew immediately when I went in to speak to him and saw the number of messages that there was something way wrong. He met with both of them that day and they both denied any wrongdoing. And my son at this point was 16. And of course, he just wanted this to go away. And I think he thought that now that I knew that it would just stop and he could go about his business. And one of the things I want to explain to people about groomings, a lot of times when I speak, people don't even know what grooming is. So you have normal grooming where you groom someone to be a CEO of a business or you groom your kids to be of good moral character. But this is unlawful grooming whereby somebody in a position of authority or someone who is older is enticing someone who is younger. And it's usually to have sex with that person or that child. And they also groom the community, the family. And I want to also explain to people that this is usually not a white van syndrome, right? So it's not somebody, a stranger who comes up to abduct your child or to groom your child. This is typically someone that you know. Most of the time, it's someone you know, a family member, a teacher, neighbor, clergy. It could be any of the above. So just know that it's usually somebody that is within your circle. And when the principal then met with both and they denied any wrongdoing, I went back to meet with him and I said, is there, are you going to be contacting the Department of Children and Family Services as a mandatory reporter? He said, actually, I have nothing to report because they're both denying any wrongdoing. He said, but you're Andrew's mom. You can open a DCFS investigation anytime you want. And he must have said it at least 4 times in that conversation, trying to prompt me to open up an investigation.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I left there, went to go speak to a pastor in town because I mean, this is somebody's livelihood. You know, you want to make sure that what you're thinking is actually what's happening. And I waited probably a full week before I actually contacted them and then
Well,
finally contacted DCFS.
well. I mean, listen. If you've got a that sort of thing going on, of course you have to. Now you contact the child services, and they get involved. Everything's moving forward. What happened from there?
So when I contacted them, they were supposed to be out within 24 hours. And I don't know if you know this, but we have a huge problem with our DCFS system. It took them
Why
about
ask?
Yes. It took them about 6 days to come out, and that was only after me calling the director of Illinois asking what the problem was because I had called the local office and they said that the person was on vacation and wouldn't be back for a few days and then they would get in contact with me. So the director said, if someone is not out there today, get back to me and let me know. And the local office called me back and said they could get someone out there the next day. And I called back, left a message for the director, and about 10 minutes later, I got a phone call at work saying from the high school that DCFS was on the way. So she must have called them and said, you will get out there today. By the time I got there, they already had my son in a room talking to him with one of the counselors from the school. And my son was really not happy with me. He was ticked off. The next day would have been better. I could have given him at least a heads up that they were coming and had that conversation with him. So he was not happy with me at all. He just wanted this to stop. And he walked out of the room as I was walking in. He said, "You are absolutely ridiculous," And I walked in, the investigator said, I don't know why it was so imperative for us to come out so quickly. This just seems to be benign text messaging. And I handed her the 3 weeks worth of text messages. I said, "That's just 3 weeks worth. This has been going on since May and it's October." And she said, "Oh." And I told her, I said, "This is probably not the worst thing that you've ever seen or anything that you've gone through, but this is the worst thing we're going through right now." I said, "I have no idea what is in those text messages. But I said, this does not seem or feel right. I have a gut feeling that this is not good." And she said, "Well, we can't do anything about a mother's gut feeling." I said, "No, but it's your job to do the investigation at this point." So I was a little angry in that meeting, I'll have to admit, and was not happy. Um, but then left there. And at this point, I was kind of stuck. So I was that mom that would check my son's phone intermittently throughout the week, 3 or 4 times a week, check his text messages, his emails, what apps he had on his phone. I never saw one of over 6,000 messages, Tom, because he would delete them when they came in because he knew I was checking his phone. So at this point, I needed to find somebody who could pull those deleted messages off the phone. And took me a couple weeks, but I did finally found an investigator in Joliet, which is about 15 miles from where I live. I'm in Illinois, southwest of Chicago. And when I found the investigator, I ended up telling my son, I let him have his phone for the weekend. And I said, on a Sunday night late again, and I said, "I need your phone. I found somebody who can get the messages off the phone." And his face just went green. And I said, "Is there something you need to tell me?" He goes, "I can't tell you." He said, he couldn't even look at me. He said, "I'll talk to the principal tomorrow and the detective," because I had already filed a report with the police as well, just
Yeah.
based on my hunch that something was not right.
Yeah.
And so he meets with the principal and the detective the next day for about 3 hours. And principal comes out and he said, "You were spot on with what you were thinking. And we will open up our own DCFS investigation at this point." And he said, "Andrew wants to tell you himself." So we went home and my son told me that this teacher wanted to make a sex video with him and he'd refer to his body part as "my little guy," put that all in text message. And the principal said, "Come back if you have any questions, you want to talk further." So I went back that afternoon and he asked what
This
he
is an
said and I
adult
told him.
coach. I want to remind everybody.
Yes.
I don't want to walk past this, right? So you have an adult, a coach, a teacher who is talking to a 10-year-old child
Well,
about
he's
making a
15. He
sex
was
video,
15.
15-year-old child about
Mm-hmm.
making a sex video, referring to his member, if you will. I mean, this. I'm not gonna ruin the story for anybody when I tell you. Unfortunately, this guy hasn't been castrated yet. But let's just continue on from
It's
there.
true. So when I went back, the principal said, "Well, what did he tell you?" So I told him. He goes, "He didn't even tell you the worst part." And he said that he actually offered him 500 and 1,000 and then $1,500 for oral sex, and it was all via text message. So we end up nothing happens at this point, other than the teacher gets put on paid administrative leave because of their union
Paid
contract.
leave, paid
Paid
leave
leave.
for
Yep.
after soliciting to pay a child for oral sex.
Right.
Paid leave for a teacher that does that. Just to be real clear.
Right. And that's because of the union, right? So the union is the one who sets the contract, so they can't put them off on unpaid leave, because I'm sure that the principal would have loved to have done more than just put them off on unpaid leave. So, and to give a little more preface to this too, I'm a physical therapist and I was in this guy's home in May of 2010 when he started texting my son, treating a family member for physical therapy. I was also coaching softball at the same high school where he was coaching baseball. So he knew me as a parent, as a healthcare provider, and as a colleague. So that's where the grooming comes in. But I didn't hesitate to, and I think that's the other thing I want to stress to parents is if you feel in your gut that something is wrong, it probably is. So go with that gut feeling and don't worry about others' feelings. Try to protect your kids at all costs. And that's the biggest message to get out there too. So then later, after I met with him, nothing is really happening at this point. He doesn't get arrested, other than our detective had asked the state's attorney for a subpoena for the teacher's cell phone and for his computer, and that got denied. So this all hinged on
That got
text
denied?
messaging.
Wait,
It got denied.
so you had text messages you had pulled off the phone, and they
Well, they
included
hadn't gotten them yet.
solicitation. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
they hadn't
how?
gotten them yet.
But you have your son testifying to it.
Right,
Your
right.
son cooperating, and we've got a claim of a solicitation for oral sex with a child, and the state's attorney didn't feel like we ought to maybe look into this.
That's right. So that got denied for both the cell phone and the computer. And, knowing what I know now and the stuff that I've researched, it makes you wonder, was somebody on the inside involved, right? Or who are they protecting? So that's where my mind goes now. I didn't think about that then. I didn't know all that I know now. But so they take my son's phone. Our detective has to take it to that detective for chain of custody. So he takes him the cell phone, and he had the phone for about 3 months. Couldn't get the messages off the phone because Apple had just done an upgrade and he couldn't pull the messages off. So Apple, Verizon, none of those places have to help these investigators at all, to make it easy to get these messages off. So that's another law we need to work on. But anyway, so he couldn't get the messages off. The detective went there, took the phone then down to the Illinois State Police. They then had the phone for about another 4 months. So now we're looking at almost a full year after I overheard that first conversation. They can't get the messages off the phone. And by the grace of God, I had a friend whose husband was a Secret Service agent, and I was telling her what happened, and she said, you really need to meet our other friend. He works on a pedophile task force with the Secret Service. So for those people who don't know, the Secret Service, when they're not serving and protecting, they will help local jurisdictions with cases and task forces. So I went and met with him, and he said, Michelle, they just want you to go away. This isn't enough for just one kid, and it's too much work. And I said, but it's my kid. And he said, I understand that. He said, I'm going to give you 2 business cards. Keep one for yourself. Take one to the state's
Who is this
attorney.
that told you to go away? That they wanted you to go away?
So the Secret Service agent told me that that's what the state's attorney was thinking, right? That the state's attorney was thinking, this is just too much work,
For
you know?
Illinois,
Right.
your state's attorney loves child molesters. Just FYI,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. It's really unbelievable. And so I ended up, meeting with this Secret Service agent, gives me 2 business cards, says, keep one for yourself, take one to the state's attorney, and tell him if he doesn't have the messages off that phone in the next 7 days, you are going to turn it over to the feds. He goes, I'll have them off of there in 15 minutes. So I ended up doing that, and we had the messages back then in 3 days, which leads me to believe they probably had them the whole time, or at least a good portion of the time, and just weren't willing to give them up. So I ended up meeting with 2 assistant state's attorneys and my husband at the courthouse here in Grundy County. And Morris, Illinois is in the county seat. So we live in, the same town where the courthouse is. And go down and we meet with them, and there's a stack of papers sitting in front of them. There's an older gentleman. He said, I just don't think we have enough to go on. There's too many gaps in the transcripts, and they're going to say that you don't know what's in those other messages that are missing. And I said, well, are those the messages sitting in front of you? And he said, yes. I said, can I see them? And they both looked at each other like they weren't expecting that question. And I said, well, here's the deal. I said, that's my property, and so is the phone. So if you're doing nothing with them, I'm leaving with that here today.
oh,
So they let me read the messages. And as I'm reading through, tears are just dripping from my face because everything I told you about was in the messages. Those weren't missing. Those weren't part of the missing texts. So where he wanted to make a video with him, where he offered him the money, referred to his body part as my little guy, and other horrible text messages all in there. And up until this point in time, I'd been pretty compliant, pretty even keeled. I hadn't really lost my cool at all. I wasn't familiar with the system and how it worked. So I pushed the messages back very slowly, and I slammed my hands on the table and yelled like I never yelled before. I said, you've got to be kidding me. And I looked at the older guy. I said, you have grandchildren that go to this school. And I looked at the younger guy. I said, you have kids that will be going to this school. I said, you guys are okay with this guy teaching your kids? And my husband started kicking me under the table, trying to get me to calm down. I yelled at him. I said, you kick me one more time, I'm kicking you out that door. Like, I was so irate. I I tease, about this
Good.
whole mama bear picture that they have now, with the bears crawling and you have the cub crawling behind them. That's the mama bear. And so I actually came up with this logo because that's what you look like when you're fighting
Yeah.
for your kids, right?
Yeah.
So that was how I felt at the time in that conference room. And the older guy said, if there was just another child or somebody else who could corroborate this story, I said, because one's not enough. I
No.
said, I was yelling. I said, so what does he have to do? Sodomize my child before you guys actually do anything? I said, we actually caught him before he did anything. And so it was not pretty. And they told me I needed to calm down. I said, I want to meet with the actual state's attorney because I hadn't up until this point. And of course, he was busy. So I called back at 8:01 the next morning and they said that he was busy. I said, that's fine. I introduced, who I was. I said, I'm going to be coming down and picking up the text messages and my cell phone. And so I got a call back from him personally about 15 minutes later saying he could meet with me that afternoon. And I had printed off an article where he said that he had come back to Grundy County to protect the children and families of Grundy County. So I printed that off, took it with me, and told him how unhappy I was with how things were being handled. And he said he wasn't very familiar with our case. I said, I've heard that about you, actually, that you really don't know what's going on in our county. And I said, which is unfortunate. I said, because you went to this high school, you live in this county. I find it very odd that you don't know what's going on. And I set the article down. I said, how about we start doing this? You said you came back here to protect the kids and families of Grundy County. Let's start doing that. And the detective had shared with me that he was waiting for 4 other subpoenas on different cases and a couple of child abuse cases. And I mentioned that. I said, I know that the Morris Police Department is waiting on some subpoenas from you for other abuse cases, and you're sitting on those. I'm like, I don't know who you're protecting. And so the next day, the detective called me and he asked me what I said. And I told him, he said, well, we just got 4 subpoenas we've been waiting on for over 6 months. And so, I mean, I don't know what was going on there at the time and what the deal was, but this guy had been placed into that position because the state's attorney who was voted in was moved into a judge position.
Yeah.
So it's really unfortunate that this is what we have to deal with. I had to fight so hard to get anything to move or for anything to happen. So they have these messages. They don't indict him. They don't do anything to him. A couple months go by, and I get a call from the principal at the school. He said, I'd really like to talk to you. So I go down there, and he said, we've been trying to get them to subpoena the personnel file, and they won't subpoena it. So I went back down to the state's attorney's office, asked him to subpoena the personnel file. Now, mind you, I waited, I think, about 2 hours in the waiting room this time. I think he thought he could wait me out, but I wasn't going anywhere. And so he brings me back, and I said, the principal called, said that he's told you that there are things in this personnel file that you're going to want to see, and he asked you to subpoena it. And he said, well, what could possibly be in there that we would need? I said, what skin is it off of your back? Can you just get it? So he does the subpoena, and the attorneys for the school won't release it to him until I come down to sign off on it. And they use the HIPAA law because my son's a minor and his name is all over this paperwork.
Yeah.
So I go in there and I read this. Now, this was a meeting that took place with the principal, the superintendent, the teacher, and the union rep. And he flat out asked him, did you ever offer Andrew money for oral sex? Did you want to make a sex video? And did you refer to his body part as my little guy? And he said he put his head down, shook his head in affirmation, and said yes. I'm like, we got him.
So you had an admission.
We have an admission, right, in front of 3 witnesses. So I go down to the state's attorney's office and I tell him what was in there. And he said, why'd they let you see it? And he was really angry. And I said, because of HIPAA law, my son's a minor. He said, they didn't have to do that. I said, honestly, I think they did it because they knew I was having so much trouble down here with you. And if he's not arrested in the next 7 days, I will have every major news station on your front lawn. So he waited the full 7 days before he indicted him. So then he finally did indict him for solicitation of a minor. And then, as you know, it goes status hearing after status hearing after status hearing. Nothing is really happening.
It doesn't have to go that way. This is just what happens when you've got an AG or an attorney that doesn't want to actually do something. This is what you experienced. Just to be real clear, my opinion as an attorney is this. What you experienced was a state's attorney that was doing everything he could to protect this guy and to prevent putting a child molester in jail. Someone who solicited a child for sex, someone who was attempting to molest a child. This scumbag piece of crap used his position to try and shield that guy because he didn't want to see this guy put in jail for whatever reason. This is the. I'm gonna let you finish telling your story because I'm gonna go off.
Yeah, well, welcome to the club. That's where I was back then. And
Yeah.
so at this point, it is 2012. So remember, this started in 2010. So 2012, my son graduated high school in June of that year. And we ended up voting in a new state's attorney in 2012. He takes office in January of 2013. And our detective went to him and said, hey, there are a couple cases that are hanging out there that you really need to work on right away. And one of them was ours because we were already about 2.5 years into this. And so he met with me and my husband and my son. So my son now had just finished his first year of college and was 18. And he said, I think we're going to have to take a plea deal at this point. And, he said, it's been so long, they're going to say that you can't remember what happened. There's gaps in the transcripts. They will do anything they can to make this look bad and make you look bad.
You have an
So
admission.
I was
That's
ticked.
a straight up lie. That's a
I
straight
was
up lie.
ticked. And we end up, so here's the thing, Tom, is God's hand was all over this from the very beginning. So I don't care who this guy was trying to protect or who anybody was trying to protect, but God was not going to let this go through because he had other plans and other plans for us. So we go to court in August of 2013, and this guy, by the grace of God, decides he doesn't want to take a plea deal and he wants to take it to trial. Now that never happens.
Yeah,
Never
that doesn't.
happens.
That's insane.
So he would have still been able to teach. He would not have to register as a sex offender. He would have paid a fine, but he'd be able to go and teach wherever. So
Wow.
the state's attorney and his first assist meet with me and my husband and my son a few days later. And the first assist says, hey, there's a new law that just came into play in Illinois last month in July of 2013. It's a grooming law. He said, we're going to go after that. Everything that's in that law is actually everything that happened to your son in this community and your family. And he said, but it's be difficult to get because there's no precedent set. So we end up going to court in October of 2013. My son was on the stand for about 4 hours, finished his whole first year of college, and he had to be brought back from school. He was going to school in New Jersey. And so it comes back in the beginning of the semester to testify. And then we end up getting a conviction of solicitation of a minor and unlawful grooming. So it was the very first unlawful grooming conviction in the United States. So that sets
Wonderful.
precedent. Yes. And the teacher ended up doing 30 days in jail.
30. A whopping 30.
30 days. He was actually sentenced 180 days, I think. 120 days. Had to serve the first 60. Wouldn't have to serve the other 60 unless he violated probation. And then, day for day good behavior. So he only had to serve 30 days. Paid a $2,700 fine. He had to register as a sex offender, but for only 10 years. So as of last May, he is no longer on the sex offender registry as of May of 2024. And he can never teach again, though. So that was my biggest thing, is I never want him to be able to teach again.
Yeah.
And my son, though, because when these groomers are good, they pull on the heartstrings of these kids, and he felt bad for him, right? He felt like he cost him his job. He felt like he was the reason he lost his job. And still at 19, he wasn't really fully grasping that it was not his fault at all. So he went back to school, spiraling out of control, was belligerent, was drinking, wasn't doing well at all. And we had him in counseling starting in high school. And my son, though, is very, very smart, told the counselor everything that he needed to hear to discharge him. And again, then once this happened and he got triggered again, all of this just unravels. And so did everything we could to help protect him. My son he wanted to be a United States Marine ever since he was like 7 or 8 years old, and wanted to go in the Marine Corps right out of high school. Couldn't do that. He speaks languages very well, and he wanted to be a linguist for them. And he finishes that next semester. Then the following year, he said, Mom, I'm done with school. I want to go in the Marine Corps. And I'm like, okay. So he went in, served 5.5 years in the Marine Corps. But then once they started pushing the shot in July of 21, he got out at that point. So he was affected by several things that have happened over the last several years. So,
I
but
should say.
he's in a much better place now. But it's taken all of this 16 years to get him into a good place, and still goes to counseling. When I started talking about this again a couple years ago, he was really getting triggered and went back to counseling again. I went back to counseling to try to deal with an adult child now dealing with the repercussions of this. So, just to be clear that these guys don't ever have to touch them for them to have an effect on them. So,
Well, I mean, you
parents need to
gotta.
understand that.
People should understand when you play with people's hearts in certain ways, that's going to mess them up, and it has repercussions. And when we talk about children developing, young, impressionable, these sorts of things, and doing something that just sick and twisted, I mean, these kids are messed up. They're going to be messed up. They just are,
Right,
and it's a horrific, horrific thing. And it does
right,
have an impact. And I mean, he's sadly gonna deal with some of that for the rest of his life.
right. But by the grace of God, again, we're being redeemed. So I go to a reawaken. I've been to several of them, as you know, but I went
Yes,
to
you
the one
have.
in Nashville, and I met a trafficking investigator. And this was in January of 23 when we were in Nashville at Pastor Locke's church. And
Yep.
we were at a dinner the night before, and I met Amy Coelho, who's a trafficking investigator and a paralegal for 30 years.
Yep.
And she started telling me about a case she had worked on. It was the La Luz del Mundo case, which had just finished up in November of 22. And it was a church cult where the women in the church prepared the kids in the church for the men in the church. And they busted 23 different sex trafficking cells between Mexico and California. She then told me about a Larry Nasser gymnast that was one of their clients in a couple other cases. So in my head, I'm like, I'm going to tell her about my measly little case here from Illinois. So I start to tell her, and she says, "Hold on, are you from Illinois?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "When was that?" I said, 2013. He was sentenced in January of 2014. And she grabbed my arm and got tears in her eyes. And she said, "I need to get a picture with you and send this to my team." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "We use your case for every trafficking case we bust because you have the only grooming conviction in the United States." And she goes, "Including the cases I just told you about." And I lost it. Like, we were both crying. The people around us are like, "What is going on over there?" But just 5 days before that, I'd been going to like all these school board meetings, pushing back against COVID and the masks on these kids and
Yeah.
doing everything we've been asked to do to try to protect the kids in the schools. And I'm laying in bed, crying like, "God, is anything I'm doing even making a difference?" And then 5 days later, he shows me how great he is and puts Amy in front of me to tell me this story. And so I then asked her, I said, "So if you're using this for all of your cases," she goes, "No, no, no, you don't understand. Everybody in the United States is using this for their cases because there is no other conviction." And I said, "If that's true, could they have used this for the Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein trials?" And she goes, "I'd have to look at the case file." She goes, "But they would have nothing else to use. So I don't know what else they would have used." So I even think that we could have had a hand in taking down one of the most prolific pedophiles of our time is very surreal for me.
Yeah.
And and then she said, "To listen to your story and how hard you had to fight at every corner, you kept fighting and pushing." And she said, "Your tenacity and your son's willingness to come forward, you guys have saved thousands of lives."
Yeah.
So lost it again, right? Crying. And to back up a little bit too, my son did not want to come forward. We had a conversation I'll never forget in our kitchen, and he said, "Mom, I don't know if I want to do this." And I told him, I said, "This is no longer about you, right? So this is about the next kid. This is about the 3 boys that live across the street and the 4 that live down the street. If you do nothing and something happens to one of those kids and you could have stopped it, how do you face their parents?"
This is so important, and on a very, very personal level, it's one of the most challenging things that I face. Right. So if you have the ability to do something and you don't do it, on some levels, you almost feel responsible for
Yep.
what happens by your inaction. And it's both a burden and a privilege from God when you have the opportunity to do good things for people. When he blesses you with the capacity to make an impact, right? It's a blessing, but it's also one hell of a burden, and it's a heavy burden to carry. And I can imagine I can imagine what you and your son have faced, and it's a beautiful thing to me that you see that and that you realize that. Um, it, it's it's a rare trait that people understand that and see that. And man, if everybody felt just a little bit of that, it would make a world of difference. But people tend to be so wrapped up in their own lives, their own this, their own that, my this, my that, me this, me that, that they forget that sometimes God puts in front of you an opportunity to have an impact greater than yourself. And
Yep.
sometimes that means you have to sacrifice. Sometimes it's hard, but on the balance, if your sacrifice makes a difference for many people, and I think it's beautiful, beautiful
Yep.
that your son, after
Thank
going through
you.
what he went through, and
Mhm.
you, after all that, were able to do that. I mean, God bless you. Uh, there's there's a reason that I'm a big fan of your work, and you and I've talked just enough for me to know to see your heart come through on this, and that's actually a story I've never heard you tell, but I really think that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my son really, when I first started talking about this again in 23, he was really triggered and he had a conversation with me. He said, Mom, you already saved me. You don't have to do this. You don't have to keep doing this. And I said, but I do, Andrew. I said,
You
because
do.
it's not about you. And I said, I have to face God one day and he's going to say, I gave this to you. Why didn't you take care of it? And I actually said to him, when he said that to me, I said, okay, Satan. And he looked at me and I said, what better way would Satan love for me to stop saving other children than to use the person I love the most to do it? And
100%.
he just looked at me and he said, okay, and it's not been easy. It's been rough, but we're getting through it. And he's actually in a good place. And um, about 2 years ago, it's 3 years ago when I was in 22, somebody had told him about the Netflix show Cheer. And there was a fan favorite on there who was a boy that ended up molesting two kids here from Naperville, Illinois. They were twin brothers. And um, somebody told my son to watch that episode, so he did. And my son actually reached out to their attorney and wrote a letter to the two kids. And until he shared that letter with me after he sent it to them, I never really had an understanding of how he felt about me or the situation at the time. Um, but do you mind if I read a portion of that letter?
I would be honored.
Okay.
I'd be
So
honored to
he's,
share that. I hope people understand. I just want everybody to understand how deeply personal. I mean, when you're standing for others, and sometimes you fight for others and they're mad at you for it, they don't like it. The people you care about the most, the people you love the most. I mean, I've fought for my kids, I've fought for a bunch of different things. And I know like what you're saying resonates so much with me. I'll never forget some of the uh, love will drive you to fight no matter what. And it doesn't matter what you lose to do it. You just have to do it. And what you did for your son is beautiful. I'm very eager for you to share this.
yeah, so he wrote a letter, and the boys' names are Charlie and Sam. And they did an interview with them on the Netflix interview, or on the Netflix show. But he said, I sat down to write this letter and it felt like I was writing it to myself in the past. How does anyone even do that? My name is Andrew Kosick. I wanted to write to you because of the horrible, unfortunate, and most incredible situation you find yourselves in today. I was in your shoes 12 years ago when I was 15. A baseball coach and a teacher of mine did the exact same thing that your abuser did to you. He asked me for pictures, wanted to pay me to do things with him, and made me feel so confused and sad and angry and scared. I came forward to face my abuser and testified against him during trial. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I applaud you too, and I'm so proud of you for your decision to come forward. You have no clue the number of other boys and girls that you have already saved by your decision to come forward, not only with this particular offender, but in the sports community as a whole. You have sparked a change that will catch other offenders in the future before they have a chance to harm those who are not able to fight for themselves or who do not have the support of your family. My reason for writing this is that I want to offer encouragement and knowledge of what lays ahead. I do not want to sugarcoat it. It will be tough. It will be the toughest thing you ever do in your lives, and I say that as someone who ended up becoming a United States Marine. Boot camp was not nearly as tough as the decision to come forward and face fear, as you have already done, and as you will continue to do. That being said, I didn't want to discourage you from continuing this battle because it will be the most gratifying thing you will ever do in your lives as well. You will not see that now, but you will realize this as you get older. Lean on your mom for strength and encouragement, and just know that she always has your best interest at heart, no matter what you may think. While the abuse happens to you, the abuse happens to everyone that surrounds you as well. No matter how far your friends and family are, they will always support you in this decision because it's the most selfless thing you could possibly do for people you have never met. My mom always said that God put this situation in our laps because he knew that we would take care of it just as he put it in your lives as well. He knew you would have the strength to come forward to stop this pedophile from doing this to anyone else. And from what I saw in your interview on Netflix, you boys have the strength and resolve to get through this. And just know that you have so many people on your side knowing that you will prevail. I'm also writing this to tell you that you are not alone. There are unfortunately many of us out there that have been in your place, and you have all of our strength, pride, and gratitude for doing the right thing and helping to put an end to this cycle. This experience is unique to you, but the patterns that follow the trial are not. You will doubt yourselves and your decision, you will feel guilty, and you will not know how to process everything. I encourage you to seek mental health if you have not already done so. I encourage you to continue to trust in yourselves and your family that you all made the right decision. And I encourage you to make this as a positive force in your lives and not a negative one. That will, however, also not be easy to accomplish. It will take time and patience to process and grieve for everything that has happened. Have patience for the healing process. It will take time, but just know that everything you are going through now is happening for a reason. It seems unfair at the moment, but you will be so much stronger in the future for having gone through it. I hope that this letter gives you strength, resolve, and focus to continue your fight. You have each other and your mom for strength and courage, and that sounds like the best team to have in this fight. Please let your mom know that if you ever want to do a Zoom call or phone call, I have written a letter to her as well, so she has my contact information. I wish you luck and all the strength in the world. Andrew.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It took me about 5 or 6 times to be able to read that without crying because it was the very first time, really, that I knew how he felt about me, and about what had happened to him at the time. And that happened, he just turned 31 last Friday. So, I mean, he was 27, 28 when he wrote that.
It's an interesting thing, as a broken 48-year-old grumpy lawyer. Uh, you know what? I've never admitted this publicly. Um, I had an experience as a child where someone tried to do some of these things to me. And I'm not going to talk more about it than that. But when I told someone that I cared about and trusted what happened, they told me don't make up stories. That broke me on levels that imagine a baby coming and saying that to you and explaining. And it was
Right.
hard. So you having the courage to stand for your son the way that you did is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And the fact that you finally got that opportunity to see where he was and to understand, because now as an old man, I stand for the people that I love, and I do, and I fight. And my fight is about love. It's about, and I'm difficult. I'm a grumpy, crotchety old guy. I'm hard to deal with. And when I love you, it's even worse because I'm protective. I'm extremely protective. You can ask my children. It's a rough go. Um, but that core, that fight, uh, that this, by the way, Michelle, is why you've always resonated with me. I don't think I've never told you why that it was such a big deal to me, but it was and is and remains that way. Um, for for you as a mom, because now as a dad, now as someone who's formidable, right? I mean, I'm a protector. I'm a big, scary, grumpy guy. I'm an ogre. I'm a lawyer. I go after people. I can do some protecting. I'm pretty solid at that. But it's very easy to feel when you're trying and you're fighting and people are. I can imagine your son telling you, "Why are you doing this to me?" Is when he was little. I can imagine how that would hit you, and I can imagine how difficult that because that's happened to me. I had a case during COVID, and I can't get into the details, but what I can say is there was a client that I was fighting with all my heart to protect, and they kept wanting to do things that were going to be really to their detriment, and I couldn't support them. I ended up withdrawing from the case because what they were doing was going to be very detrimental to their position, and legally and ethically, I felt that that's what I had to do. But I've been through this situation. Yeah, I mean, your kids. Luckily, nothing like that has ever happened to my kids. I would probably be in jail. I don't think I could have handled it as politely as you. Uh,
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I asked my son at one point, because I had been a single mom for a long time. At the point when this happened, I was remarried, but I said, why didn't you tell me? And part of his deal, he said, Mom, I thought you were going to kill him. And I was like, well, I said, had
That's a
he touched
serious
you,
thing.
yeah, had he touched you, we might be having a different conversation because I'd probably be in jail having this conversation with you. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, so he was concerned that I would do something like that, if he were to tell me. But you know, I tried to do everything the right way by the book. Try to jump through all their hoops and just trusting that the wheels of justice would run true and that he would be found guilty. And so that's exactly what happened. Um, but some really good things are coming out of this now. And
Amen.
when I met with Amy, she said, we need to get a law put in place and amend the current grooming laws to make it so that somebody charged with grooming cannot take a plea deal. She thought that we had the only grooming conviction in the United States because they were taking plea bargains.
Yeah.
And so I ended up talking to General Flynn, who I'd become very acquainted with going to the Reawakens. He introduced me to his sister, Mary Flynn O'Neill, who now is the CEO of America's Future. And they were going around the country doing anti-trafficking summits to educate people about what to look for and what grooming is and all of those sorts of things. And so she introduced me to another paralegal out of Florida named Allie Hopper. Allie started looking at the criminal code in Florida, realized very quickly they didn't have a grooming law at all to amend. And we found out very soon that Illinois was the only state that had a grooming law in place. So I went down to Florida, spoke to a GOP group, and one of the senators was there who sponsored the bill in Florida. And he took me in the back, wanted to hear the entire story from start to finish, and had a better understanding of why this was so important and how it affected just one family. And so, as of last April, there is now a grooming law in place in Florida. We started working with another Representative, Mark Thompson, out of Iowa, that I was introduced to by Emily Peterson, another mama bear from Iowa.
Yeah.
We are not related, though. I keep finding all these Petersons that are in this fight, but none of us are related. So Emily introduced me to Mark Thompson. I got Ellie involved there as well. So we helped Mark Thompson create his bill for Iowa. So Iowa now also has a grooming law in place. There was something that happened in Arizona not too much longer after those were in place, and Arizona reached out to Florida and Iowa. They now have a grooming law in place. And there was another mom who, her daughter, her name is Susan Cobb. Her daughter was groomed and subsequently molested by a YMCA gymnastics coach in Georgia. She'd been trying to get a grooming law in place for 3 years, and after our laws fell and those bills became law, she then got a grooming law put in place in Georgia last year. And then, as of about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, Montana now has a grooming law in place. And Montana's grooming law should be model legislation. It is an unbelievable law. I don't know if you can pull it up there, but I shared it in the chat. But part of the law here is if a victim is under the age of 16 years of age, a person convicted of the offense of grooming of a child for sexual offense shall be punished by life imprisonment or imprisonment in the state prison for a term of not less than 4 years or more than 100 years, may be fined not more than $10,000. And if the victim was 12 years of age or younger and the offender 18 years of age or older at the time of the offender shall be punished by imprisonment in the state for a term of 100 years. The court may not suspend execution, so no chance of parole for the first 25 years. And after that first 25 years, if they get out, they have to, regardless, they have to enroll in and successfully complete an educational phase and a cognitive and behavioral phase of sexual offender treatment in a program. And the offender, if they are released after that 25 years, it's mandatory minimum period of imprisonment. The offender is subject to supervision by the Department of Corrections for the remainder of the offender's life and shall participate in the program for continuous satellite-based monitoring. So satellite surveillance for life if they get out at that
Amen.
25 years.
Well,
So,
I mean, listen, if you're trying to do that with children, I don't see a reason for there to be mercy, for there to be anything. And why would I ever trust that you'd not do it again?
right.
I just, for my part, am so, so, so proud to know you and of the work that you've done. Um,
Thank you.
I think I'm going to probably, Michelle, when when we get done with this interview, um, I'm, I think you've got my direct cell, don't you?
I do.
Um, will you text me? I think God put it in my heart to take some steps on this. So I'm going to do that. Text me after this. I've got a couple things that I'm going to try and do on this. Uh, and I think I'm going to talk to Mary and some others and see what I can't do. It's been something that for my part, the child trafficking is, and what we've seen is such a big deal to me because of my personal experience. And it's surprising to me that it's taken so long for me to talk about it in any sort of a public way. And this wasn't exactly a planned or expected announcement, but I think maybe that I need to step it up a little bit, and maybe I need to do a little bit more on that. So we're gonna see what we can do on this, and we'll see. I don't know how that's going to manifest. I don't have a plan. I just know that God said do it, so we'll do it. And so, thank you for your inspiration. Thank you
Sure.
for
Thank you.
continuing to fight.
Yep.
And how can people how can people support you? How can they continue to help you? What can they do to back you in this? Let's talk about that real quick.
Sure. So I've been going pretty much state to state. I would love to get in front of a bunch of senators or representatives, state reps and senators, representatives at one time. So I don't know if there's a conference that they have. I would love to be able to get in front of them all at one time and be able to tell our story and why I need them to support and sponsor this bill. But I do have several states that are interested right now. I do have Indiana, Wisconsin, Missouri. You know, your assistant that was working with you, who is now a state rep down in Missouri. She is interested in sponsoring this bill, so she's going to sponsor this bill for this next year. But if there's anybody out there that has a personal connection with a state rep or a senator who can get in contact with me, you can go to my website. It's just my name, michellepeterson.org, and there's a contact me page on there. You can contact me through there and email me. There is a donate button on there. I do a lot of this stuff on my own. I travel on my own dime. I've used most of my vacation time. I'm home right now and lunch to do this interview, so it's all on my own time. I still work full time, managing 3 outpatient physical therapy clinics, and so it's it that's helpful, But prayers are also helpful, and I do I want people to understand that this does happen to boys, and they are
It
actually
does.
paying the most money right now in the United States because the United States is the biggest purveyor of child sexual abuse, child pornography, and they're paying more money now for boys than they are for girls.
Yeah.
And there's an organization called 1in6.org where 1 in 6 boys under the age of 18 will be molested. 1 in 4 girls under the age of 18 will be molested by the time they're 18. So just know that this does happen. And Tom, your story is not unusual.
Oh,
Most times when I speak, I will get someone between the ages of 40 and 60 will come up to me and tell me that they were molested as a child, had never told anybody before,
yeah.
and they'll thank me for coming forward and for believing my son. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, that's
Takes
the
a lot of
hardest thing
courage
for
to believe.
boys, and it's harder for boys to come forward. I
Much.
think they feel less than, and I just, man, just believe your kids, fight for your children. Amy gave me another statistic that she states that if 79% of the kids whose parents fight for them, those kids will become productive members of society.
Yeah.
So fight for your children with every ounce that you have, every breath that you have. And I don't care. I mean, sometimes people think that I'm a pain in the butt because I do fight so hard and I do stand up and I do
No,
push
you
back.
can't fight too hard for your children. There's no
Right.
such thing. One of the things that I think it's hard for people around me to see is when I fight for things, it's so intense, it's so tough that it's a difficult thing, but it's it's out of love. It's a thing that you do because if you care, and that's what you've got to do for your children and for other people's children and anybody's children. Children deserve fought for. Everybody. I don't know that I could stress that enough. Your son deserved you, and he deserved everybody else to fight for him. When I grew up, and I'd like to think I ended up a fairly productive member of society, but I will tell you, I had no one fighting for me. I didn't even have. I got told that don't make up stories. So you've got to understand. I could have went a lot of different directions at a lot of different times in my life. It was something that I carried with me. Um, if you don't believe your child, if you won't take them serious, understand, and you're right, especially for a boy, you don't talk about it. It's an embarrassment. You don't do this. You don't do that. I mean, the whole thing is awful, right? And
Right.
and so it is so critically important that you believe and you stand by and you fight for all children. All children. It doesn't matter who they are. It's why when I started fighting on the COVID stuff, it was my kids. But people would talk to me about their kids, and man, I'd go to battle for kids. It doesn't matter whether
Right.
they're mine or not. Like obviously mine are first, but it doesn't matter because I was the kid who didn't get fought for, and I know what that means, and I know the demons that I had to face to overcome that and to become a productive member of society. So I'm praying for the kids who aren't being fought for. If you are a mom and a dad and you won't fight for your kids, you're a piece of shit. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're offended by that. I don't care if you're bothered by it. That's what you are.
Hmm.
Because your kids, if you won't fight for them, I don't know what you're worse than dead to me. You've lost my respect. And the things that are the most amazing to me are the people who will fight, who will go to battle for the kids. This is such a phenomenal thing. It's such a big deal to me. Um, and everybody, I know we got the riots, all sorts of things going on. I was going to get to more of that today, but I'm going to be honest with you. This is such a big deal to me. And Michelle, I'm so grateful for you. I'm so
Thank
grateful
you.
for what you're doing. You have made a difference.
Thank
And
you.
and where
Yeah.
you have an opportunity, you do have an obligation. And so I guess I better pick it up a little bit here, because I got 48 years of not fighting as hard as I should have on this. Well, maybe not that many, but
As America's future says, you got to get in the fight. Yeah.
well, I've
Get in
been
the
I've
fight.
been fighting pretty hard, but I should have been. I think I got to get a little bit more on this one. So I'm gonna do that, and uh, I'll look forward to working with you and standing with you on the battle lines, because I think we're going to have to do some stuff on this, and I think it'll make a difference for people. And man, I keep saying I'm not going to take any more projects, but this isn't a project. This is a passion. It's
Yeah, for sure.
when we talk about kids. I got a few states we'll get going on,
That sounds good.
and I might have a connection or two here or there. So we'll see what we can do on this. And just thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. And thanks for having me and getting the word out. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, everybody, this is Michelle Peterson. Please, michellepeterson.org. Please support her. This woman did right by her child and has helped kids all over the country. God bless her. Say prayers for her. Donate to her. Back her. Whatever you can do. Back this lady. She deserves it way more than anyone else I know. So thank you all for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.
Thank you.